Admiral Kang Su-min stood on the bridge of her massive warship, looking down at the small blue planet called Earth. The view was beautiful, but she wasn't here for sightseeing. Her job was simple and brutal. Give these humans 3 days to surrender, or turn their world into burning dust. The Galactic Empire had done this dance 1,000 times before. Small worlds always thought they were special. They always believed they could somehow fight back against the most powerful force in the galaxy. But in the end, they all knelt or died. Su-min had been doing this for 30 years. She'd seen planets, with technology that could bend light, worlds where the people could read minds, and civilizations that built cities in the hearts of stars. None of it mattered when the Empire's fleet showed up. Raw power always won. Her communications officer, a young alien with purple skin and 4 eyes, turned toward her. "Admiral, we're receiving a response from the planet's surface." "Put it through," Su-min said, settling into her command chair. She expected the usual, either desperate begging or angry threats. Sometimes the primitives tried to buy time by pretending to negotiate. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and clear. It belonged to a human male who introduced himself as Lee Jin-woo from something called Earth's Communications Center. His words were simple, but something about his tone made Su-min pause. "We warned you not to come. You chose war. We're sorry for what comes next." That was it. No pleading, no anger, no desperate last-minute offers. Just a statement of fact, and what sounded like genuine sadness. Su-min burst out laughing. The sound echoed across her bridge, and several of her officers joined in. This was rich. These humans actually thought they could threaten the Third Fleet. Her ships could crack planets in half. Her weapons could turn entire moons into vapor. And this primitive species was apologizing to her. "Did you hear that?" she called out to her crew. "They're sorry for what comes next, as if they have any choice in the matter." Her weapons officer, a massive creature with scales and claws, rumbled with amusement. "Should we show them what's coming next, Admiral?" Su-min was still chuckling as she looked at the tactical display. Earth had some satellites orbiting around it, and what looked like a few small space stations. Pathetic. Her flagship alone carried more firepower than this entire solar system could probably muster. "Not yet," she said. "Let them sweat for a while. Fear makes the surrender sweeter." But something nagged at her as she watched the peaceful blue world spinning below. In 30 years of conquest, she'd never heard a response quite like that. Most species either raged against their fate or broke down in terror. This human had sounded disappointed, like a teacher whose student had failed an important test. Her science officer, a thin being with translucent skin, spoke up from his station. "Admiral, we're detecting some unusual energy signatures from the planet. Nothing threatening, but the patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Su-min waved a dismissive hand. "Every species thinks they're unique. Run a full scan of their defenses and prepare the standard intimidation package. If they want to see what's coming next, we'll give them a preview." The Third Fleet was impressive to behold. 50 massive warships hung in space like predators surrounding prey. Each ship was the size of a small city, packed with weapons that could reshape worlds. The fleet's combined firepower had ended civilizations that had existed for millions of years. Yet as the hours passed, Su-min found herself thinking about that human's voice. Lee Jin-woo had spoken like someone who knew a secret, like someone who was genuinely sorry about what was going to happen, but not because his people were about to die. Her communications officer interrupted her thoughts. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from Earth." "Another surrender offer?" Su-min asked. "No, ma'am, it's the same human as before. He's asking if we're sure we want to proceed. He says it's not too late to turn around." This time, Su-min didn't laugh. Something cold touched her spine. In 3 decades of conquest, no primitive species had ever asked the Empire if they were sure. They begged, they threatened, they tried to bargain, but they never asked if the mighty Galactic Empire was certain about their decision. "Tell him," she said slowly, "that the Third Fleet doesn't turn around. Tell him he has 2 days left." The response came back within minutes. Lee Jin-woo's voice was even sadder than before. "We understand. We'll be ready." Admiral Kang Su-min decided it was time to show these humans what real power looked like. She'd given them 2 days to think about surrender, but their silence was starting to annoy her. Time for a demonstration that would break their spirit once and for all. Target. "Their moon," she ordered from her command chair. "Prepare the Worldbreaker cannon." The bridge fell silent. Even her veteran crew respected the Worldbreaker. It was the Empire's most feared weapon, a massive energy beam that could crack planets like eggs. They'd used it to destroy the homeworlds of 3 different species who'd refused to surrender. The sight of their moon exploding would surely convince these humans to be reasonable. Captain Park Hyun-soo, commander of the escort ship Thunder's Edge, watched from his own bridge as the flagship's main weapon began to charge. The process was always impressive, energy readings climbing higher and higher until the very fabric of space around the cannon began to glow and twist. "All ships, maintain safe distance," Sumin's voice crackled over the fleet communications. "We don't want debris damaging our hulls when their moon explodes." The Worldbreaker cannon reached full power. A beam of pure destruction lanced out from the flagship, bright enough to blind anyone looking directly at it. The energy bolt raced across space toward Earth's pale moon, carrying enough force to shatter worlds. Then, something impossible happened. 3 kilometers from the moon's surface, the beam simply disappeared. Not deflected, not absorbed. It vanished as if it had never existed at all. The targeting computers showed the beam reaching the target zone, but there was no explosion, no flash of light, no debris field, nothing. "What just happened?" Sumin demanded, rising from her chair. "Why didn't the moon explode?" Her weapons officer frantically checked his displays. "Admiral, all systems show normal operation. The cannon fired at full power, but somehow the beam just stopped existing." Park Hyun-soo stared at his own scanner readings in confusion. His instruments had tracked the energy beam all the way to the target, then lost it completely. It was like watching someone throw a rock that vanished mid-flight. "Run diagnostics on all weapon systems," Sumin ordered. There must be some kind of malfunction. But before her crew could respond, something else caught their attention. Earth's orbital platforms, the small innocent-looking satellites they'd dismissed as primitive, were beginning to move. These weren't the quick, jerky movements of rocket-powered spacecraft. The platforms glided through space with an eerie smoothness, like they were swimming through invisible water. They moved in perfect formation toward the Imperial fleet, and as they approached, Park Hyun-soo noticed something that made his blood run cold. "Admiral," he called over the communications channel, "you need to see this. The platforms aren't using any propulsion we can detect. No heat signatures, no exhaust, no energy emissions. They're just moving." Sumin watched her tactical display. As the mysterious platforms continued their approach, they looked harmless enough, simple geometric shapes maybe 50 meters across. But the way they moved defied everything she knew about space travel. The first platform reached the outer edge of the Imperial formation, passing close to a destroyer called Void's Hammer. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then Park Hyun-soo's scanner operator called out in alarm, "Captain, the Void's Hammer is showing massive structural degradation, hull integrity dropping rapidly." On the main screen, they watched in horror as the destroyer began to fall apart. But this wasn't battle damage from weapons fire. The ship's hull was aging, decades of wear and corrosion happening in seconds. Metal plates turned brown with rust, then crumbled away entirely. Viewports clouded over and cracked. Inside the dying ship, the crew was experiencing the same impossible aging. Park Hyun-soo could hear their panicked communications as years of life drained away in moments. Within minutes, the Void's Hammer was nothing but a skeleton of corroded metal drifting through space. "How is this possible?" Sumin whispered, watching more platforms approach other ships in her fleet. Everywhere they passed, Imperial vessels began to decay and die. Park Hyun-soo's science officer, a brilliant young woman named Kim So-young, was frantically analyzing the sensor data. "Captain, I don't think they're using weapons at all. These platforms seem to be manipulating time itself, accelerating the aging process in localized areas." "That's impossible," Park Hyun-soo said, but even as he spoke, he watched another destroyer crumble to dust as a platform drifted past it. "Sir," So-young continued, her voice shaking, "if I'm reading this correctly, They're not just affecting time. They're rewriting the basic laws of physics in the space around our ships. Matter, energy, causality. They're treating it all like software they can reprogram. The horrifying Aruth began to sink in. The Empire had faced advanced technology before, even encountered species with powerful psychic abilities. But this was something else entirely. These humans weren't fighting them with bigger guns or stronger shields. They were casually rewriting reality itself. Park Hyun-soo watched his instruments as another platform glided toward his ship, and he realized that all their weapons, all their armor, all their military might meant nothing against an enemy who could simply decide that the laws of physics no longer applied to them. The emergency message that reached the Empire's capital world of Nexus Prime was unlike anything in their military history. Captain Park Hyun-soo, one of only 3 survivors from the Third Fleet, stood before the War Council with bandages covering half his face and his voice barely above a whisper. "They didn't fight us," he repeated for the 10th time. "They just changed the rules, made our ships age 1,000 years in minutes, made our most powerful weapons disappear like they never existed." General Kim Do-hyun, Supreme Commander of Imperial Forces, slammed his fist on the obsidian table. His scarred face showed the fury of someone who'd conquered entire star systems and never known defeat. "Impossible. No species can manipulate physics itself. You must have encountered some kind of advanced technology we haven't seen before." But Park Hyun-soo shook his head slowly. "Sir, I've been fighting for the Empire for 20 years. I know technology. This wasn't technology. They were treating reality like clay they could reshape with their hands." The War Council chamber buzzed with nervous whispers. Representatives from 1,000 worlds shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Galactic Empire had ruled for 10,000 years precisely because nothing could challenge their military supremacy. The idea that some primitive humans could destroy an entire fleet without firing a single shot was shaking the very foundation of their power. General Kim Do-hyun studied the sensor recordings that Park Hyun-soo had managed to save. The footage showed Imperial warships simply crumbling to dust as strange geometric platforms drifted past them. No explosions, no weapon signatures, no energy beams, just impossible decay happening in fast forward. "How many ships did they destroy?" the general asked. "All of them, sir. 47 heavy cruisers, 60 destroyers and Admiral Su-min's flagship. Over 200,000 crew members." Park Hyun-soo's voice cracked. "I only survived because my ship was at the edge of the formation when I ordered a retreat." The silence in the chamber was deafening. In the Empire's entire history, they'd never lost an entire fleet to any enemy, let alone a species that wasn't even supposed to have space travel. General Kim Do-hyun stood up, his massive frame casting shadows across the room. "Then we respond with overwhelming force. If these humans have some kind of new weapon, we'll crush them with numbers they can't possibly handle." Over the next week, the largest military mobilization in galactic history began. From 10,000 worlds across the Empire, warships lifted off and jumped to hyperspace. Battle cruisers the size of cities, planet-killer dreadnoughts, reality-warping weapons that could tear holes in space itself. Elite units that had never known defeat prepared for what their commanders promised would be the final battle of the War. Captain Yoon Tae-jin, commanding the experimental vessel Infinity's Edge, watched through his viewports as the massive fleet assembled at the edge of human space. Millions of ships stretched across light years, their combined firepower capable of sterilizing entire solar systems. It was the most beautiful and terrifying sight he'd ever witnessed. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth." The voice that came through the speakers was different from the earlier messages. This time it was a woman, speaking in the same calm, sad tone they'd heard before. She introduced herself as Dr. Choi Nari from something called Earth Science Directorate. "We know you're out there," she said simply. "We can see your fleet. We want you to know this is your last chance to turn back. We don't want to hurt you. Please, for the sake of your people, don't make us show you what we're really capable of." General Kim Do-hyun's response was broadcast across the entire fleet. "Surrender now, and we'll make your deaths quick. Continue this resistance, and we'll make your species suffer for 1,000 years." Dr. Choi Nari's reply came back within minutes, and everyone in the fleet could hear the genuine sorrow in her voice. "We understand. We hoped it wouldn't come to this, but we understand. We'll be ready." Captain Yoon Tae-jin felt a chill run down his spine. He'd heard Park Hyun-soo's testimony about what happened to the Third Fleet. These humans didn't sound like they were bluffing or buying time. They sounded like teachers who were disappointed that their students had failed to learn an important lesson. "All ships, prepare for battle," General Kim Do-hyun's voice echoed across the fleet communications. "Today we show the galaxy that nothing can stand against the Empire's might." But as millions of warships began moving toward Earth, many of the veterans couldn't shake the feeling that they were sailing toward something far more dangerous than any enemy they'd ever faced. The humans' warnings didn't sound like the desperate threats of a cornered species. They sounded like genuine regret for what was about to happen to the Empire's forces. The largest fleet in galactic history pressed forward into human space, and somewhere on Earth, Dr. Choi Nari was preparing humanity's response. The Imperial fleet stretched across space like a metal ocean, millions of warships ready to unleash destruction on a scale the galaxy had never seen. General Kim Do-hyun stood on the bridge of his command dreadnought, watching as his forces moved into attack formation. This time would be different. This time, raw numbers and firepower would overwhelm whatever tricks these humans possessed. "All weapons charged and ready, sir," reported his tactical officer. "Target locks acquired on the human homeworld." But before the general could give the order to fire, something impossible began happening throughout the massive fleet. Human ships started appearing everywhere, not flying in from outside the formation, but simply materializing inside it like ghosts becoming solid. Captain Yoon Tae-jin watched from his bridge as one of these mysterious vessels appeared just a few hundred meters from his ship. It didn't look like any spacecraft he'd ever seen. Instead of the sharp angles and heavy armor of Imperial warships, this human vessel seemed to flow like liquid metal, its surface shifting and changing as he watched. "Sir, should we open fire?" his weapons officer asked, hand hovering over the firing controls. But before Captain Yoon could answer, something extraordinary happened. The space around his ship began to change, not damaged or destroyed, transformed. The cold vacuum of space suddenly filled with warm, breathable air that somehow didn't drift away. Stars began to shine brighter, casting rainbow colors across his viewports. Throughout the Imperial fleet, similar transformations were taking place. On Admiral Yang Tae-hee's flagship, the crew watched in amazement as their plasma cannons slowly changed shape. The deadly weapons twisted and reshaped themselves into beautiful flowering vines that grew across the ship's hull, blooming with flowers that shouldn't have been able to exist in space. "What's happening to our weapons?" Yang Tae-hee demanded, but her crew could only stare in wonder. Captain Yoon's armor-plated hull was undergoing its own transformation. The thick metal plates that protected his ship from enemy fire were becoming something that looked like crystal sculptures, each piece reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at, but filled the observers with inexplicable joy. The most incredible change was the sound. Space was supposed to be silent, but now the vacuum carried the gentle laughter of human children. Not threatening or mocking, just the pure, happy sound of kids playing somewhere far away. Some Imperial soldiers found themselves smiling despite their fear, remembering their own childhoods on distant worlds. Dr. Lee Sang-ho, Chief Science Officer on Captain Yoon's ship, frantically checked his instruments. "Captain, according to our sensors, the fundamental laws of physics are being rewritten in real time around our entire fleet. Mass, energy, even causality itself, they're treating it all like a computer program they can edit." But the humans weren't done teaching their lesson. Throughout the Imperial formation, crew members began experiencing something that challenged everything they believed about warfare. Instead of pain and destruction, they felt peace. Not forced or artificial, but genuine calm spreading through their minds. Some of the older Imperial commanders began to understand what was happening. Commander Park Ji-woo, a veteran of 50 battles, spoke quietly to his bridge crew. "They're not attacking us. They're showing us what they could do if they wanted to. Look around. They could have turned our ships into flowers completely, but they left our life support and basic systems alone. They could have changed us into something else, but we're still ourselves. The realization was spreading through the fleet like wildfire. These humans possessed power beyond imagination, but they were using it to create beauty instead of destruction. They were demonstrating that they could end this war in seconds, could transform the entire Imperial fleet into harmless art, but they were choosing not to. Admiral Yang Tae-hee felt this understanding growing in her mind, but pride and fury fought against it. She'd built her career on the Empire's military supremacy. The idea that some primitive species could make her weapons into garden decorations was unbearable. "Enough of these games," she shouted, her voice echoing across the fleet communications. "Activate the Void Render." A cold silence fell over every ship in the formation. The Void Render was the Empire's most terrible secret weapon, a device that could unravel the quantum foundations of matter itself. It didn't just destroy things, it made them cease to have ever existed. Entire star systems had been erased from reality with this weapon, leaving not even the memory of their presence behind. Captain Yoon's communications officer looked up with fear in his eyes. "Sir, the Admiral is really going to use it against beings who are trying to show us mercy." But Yang Tai-hee was beyond reason now. The massive weapon began charging at the heart of her flagship, drawing power from the ship's core. Reality around the device started to bend and crack as it prepared to unleash forces that could unwrite existence itself. The human ships throughout the Imperial fleet remained calm and peaceful, their crews surely aware of what was coming, but showing no signs of fear. They continued their gentle demonstration, turning more weapons into art, filling more space with breathable air and distant laughter. The Void Render reached full power, ready to erase Earth and everything around it from the universe itself. The Void Render fired with a sound like reality itself screaming. The weapon's energy beam raced across space toward Earth, carrying enough destructive force to erase entire galaxies from existence. This wasn't just death. It was complete removal from the universe, as if the target had never been born. Admiral Yang Tai-hee watched the beam's progress on her tactical display, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and dread. She'd crossed a line that few beings in the galaxy's history had ever dared to cross, but these humans had pushed her too far with their impossible demonstrations of power. The reality destroyer reached the edge of Earth's solar system. Then something happened that broke every law of physics the Empire had ever discovered. The beam simply stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed. It froze in space like a bolt of lightning trapped in invisible glass. Captain Yoon Tae-jin stared at his scanner readings in disbelief. The energy is still there, but it's not moving. It's like time itself has stopped. Around the weapon's beam, throughout the Imperial fleet, millions of soldiers and officers watched in stunned silence as their ultimate weapon hung motionless in space. 3 light minutes from Earth. The beam pulsed with contained fury, desperate to complete its destructive purpose, but held frozen by forces beyond their comprehension. Then a new voice came from Earth, different from the others they'd heard before. This speaker introduced himself as Commander Shin Min-ho, and his words carried a sadness so deep that it seemed to reach into the souls of everyone listening. "You still don't understand," he said, his voice echoing across the millions of ships in the Imperial formation. "We didn't transcend violence to become conquerors. We transcended it to nurture." As those words faded, something extraordinary began happening to every living being in the Imperial fleet. It started as a tingling sensation in their minds, then grew into something far more profound. One by one, from the lowliest maintenance worker to Admiral Yang Tai-hee herself, they began experiencing visions. Captain Yoon found himself standing in what looked like a vast garden, but one that stretched across the entire galaxy. Stars bloomed like flowers, and planets rotated slowly like fruit ripening on cosmic trees. But this wasn't just a beautiful metaphor. He could sense that this was somehow real, a true vision of what the universe could become. In the vision, he saw humans moving through this galactic garden like careful gardeners. They weren't conquering or controlling anything. Instead, they were gently nurturing young civilizations, protecting species that were just beginning to develop consciousness, and helping entire worlds grow into something greater than they'd ever imagined possible. Dr. Lee Sang-ho, watching from his science station, saw the vision too, but his scientific mind grasped additional details that others might miss. He saw how humanity had spent centuries not building bigger weapons or faster ships, but learning to understand the deepest patterns of existence itself. They'd discovered that consciousness wasn't just something that happened in brains. It was a fundamental force of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism. The visions showed how humans had learned to help this cosmic consciousness grow and evolve. They'd found young species across the galaxy and quietly guided them away from the mistakes that could destroy them. They'd prevented wars, stopped plagues, and helped entire civilizations discover their true potential. Admiral Yang Tai-he experienced the most profound vision of all. She saw her own species as they'd been millions of years ago, not the proud conquerors they'd become, but a young civilization struggling with the same questions about violence and power that every species faced. And she saw humans watching from afar, wanting to help but waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. The vision showed her the Empire's true history, how they'd chosen conquest over cooperation, how they'd let fear and pride drive them to dominate others instead of helping them grow. She saw the civilizations they'd destroyed, the potential they'd wasted, the beauty they'd crushed under their military boots. But most importantly, she saw what they could still become. The vision showed her Imperial soldiers working alongside. Humans not as conquerors but as gardeners. She saw her own people learning to nurture instead of destroy, to guide instead of dominate. As the visions faded, a profound silence fell over the Imperial fleet. Millions of beings sat in their ships, trying to process what they'd experienced. The reality destroyer still hung frozen in space, but somehow it no longer seemed important. Captain Yoon was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper over the fleet communications. "We've been doing everything wrong, haven't we?" Other voices began joining in. Officers and crew members from across the massive formation, all sharing the same realization. They'd spent their entire lives serving an empire built on violence and fear, never knowing that there was another way. Admiral Yang Tai-he's voice, when she finally spoke, was completely different from the proud, angry tone she'd used before. Now she sounded like a child who'd just learned an important lesson. "Will you teach us?" she asked, the words carrying across space to Earth. Commander Shin Minho's response came back immediately, filled with warmth and hope that made many Imperial soldiers weep with relief. "That's why we were waiting."